Greetings, my name is Tracy Rebstock. I'm a research archivist here at the Washington State Archives. We are a division under the Office of the Secretary of State of Washington, and we basically collect the historical records of the state and local government. The branch where I'm in right now in Olympia, Washington, collects the state government records, and then also the 9 counties in the southwest corner of the state. We are a unique state archives in that we have archives buildings throughout the state of Washington. There are 5 of us in 5 different locations so that we can collect the records closer to where they were created initially. So we have a branch in Cheney, Washington on the Eastern Washington University campus. We have one in Ellensburg on the campus of the Central Washington University campus. We have one in Bellingham at Western Washington University's campus. And then we also have one in Bellevue on the Bellevue Community College campus. So we are kind of spread out throughout the state. We also have a digital archives, which I'll show a little bit today. And I don't think that I don't remember if I said last month what I was going to do this month, but I am going to talk a little bit about court records today before we get started, just to give you some little bits about court records and how to find them and what sorts of things they might have in them. And so I'm going to start off with talking about the different types of court records that are created. So a lot of times people will call us and ask us for court records, but the biggest piece is we have to know which court we're talking about. And there's so many different court options. So at the local government level, state and local government level, we have municipal, district, superior, supreme, and appeals courts. And just to be really confusing, there's also a federal district court, the Supreme Court, the federal Supreme Court, and then there's the circuit courts of the federal government. So a lot of times it's good to know what type of court record you're looking for. And for most people, they're looking for a divorce, or they're looking for a criminal court or a civil court. So it's pretty easy, but sometimes people are looking for something that happened at a municipality or in a local district court. The district courts are done in the county, and they are slightly different because they take care of the incorporated and unincorporated areas of the county that do not have their own municipal court. So this is for like misdemeanors, traffic incidents, that sort of thing. And then the biggest question I think we get a lot is about name changes. And so the name changes that happen in courts often happened in earlier times in the county superior court, and then it switched to being something that's done in the county district courts. So so it's really important to know like the time period of when the name change happened. If it's something more recent, it's going to be district court. And again, it's not federal district court, it's county district court. And even with me telling you all this out loud, I don't expect you to memorize that, but we will ask you those questions, which can be frustrating because some of the courts are called the same things, but they do different things. So bear with us as we ask you those questions to best direct your research. So some of the things that are really important to note is how to find those records. So in about the mid-1970s, the Washington court system kind of went into a centralized place so that you could, Washington courts, which you can find at courts.wa.gov, and I'll show you the website as well. You can actually kind of search for court records across counties in a better way. But prior to that time, you have to know the county where the court where the case was heard in order to be able to find it. And a lot of times they did create an index, a giant index for either civil or criminal. But they also had what they call appearance docket. I'm going to try to lift one up to show you what it looks like. They're giant books like this. Do have to have been, should try to give you about the thickness of it. I mean, I'm sitting next to it, it seems kind of big, doesn't it? Could just be the angle of the camera, but they're definitely like hefty. So this is kind of a summary. The appearance dockets are kind of a summary of the court proceedings filings. A lot of times when people ask us for court records, they're expecting transcripts or what actually happened in the courtroom. And actually what we collect are the things that happened outside of the courtroom. So as people are filing their various filings, that's what we're getting. And those filings kind of look like this, just sheets of paper that are filed with the court. And oftentimes it will be, so there could be like a motion and affidavit, there could be an order revoking the suspended sentence, there could be a search warrant or a bench warrant. I did pull a criminal case file to show the pieces, but sometimes it's fascinating because here in 1955, when this case was heard, they also included the instructions to the jury at the time. And so it's interesting to sometimes see like, well, what sort of instructions did the jury get in 1954? So sometimes it'll have those sorts of filings. They will show kind of a summary of the case, and something similar to that will be shown on the court's website. So I'm going to pull that site up for you so you can see it. I'm going to share my screen. And to give you just a brief look at the court's website, which I may have. Let's go home. So this is the court's website. Like I said, most of the court cases that are indexed on here are probably like late 70s forward. Sometimes it's the 80s forward, depending on what's in there. And then there's a couple different systems that they use, but you're able to actually do searching, and you'll be able to see this search bar here that says search case records. You could click on that. And it has more and more information about it. But basically it's a one-stop search engine for municipal, district, superior, and appellate courts for the state of Washington. And they do have their limits as far as what dates they have included. And you can actually, they give you links on how to search for different superior court cases. And then there's a link for how to get a court directory so you know who to contact. So this is a mergence of both historical and what's currently happening in the case files. And they've changed the site over time, but you can actually look for a person's case file. You can search by case file, like by the court, depending on the type of court. So it's a really great tool, but keep in mind this is going to be something a little bit more modern. If you're looking for something, the other thing you might want to use for a more modern case file is our digital archives. We do have under our collections, if you scroll down to the Superior Court cases, we have a few counties that host their sites, their case files on our site. The thing about these files are they're by case file number. So if you can't do a lot of like name searching and that sort of thing, you do have to kind of know the case file or know something about the case to search. And I'll give you my example. You could also see the date ranges, they kind of vary as well. But for Snohomish County, the best thing to do is to know the case file number and do a keyword. And I'll kind of do in real time how to look for that. There's a couple different ways you can do that. I just happened to know that I was helping somebody on a divorce case the other day, and their case, I'm trying to remember if I can remember what their name was at the time. We'll see. Remember if I can remember what that is. No. I'll do it this way. So we have a divorce certificates, and I can actually browse the series, which is fun. See if I can randomly pick somebody who has their case files up here really quickly. Definitely hitting all King County all the time. But basically what you need to know is the case file number, and I'll show you what that looks like so Spokane County Clerk has a great case file numbering system explanation. So every case number has a unique number to the case, which helps you find it. And for Spokane County, they started numbering number 1 beginning in about 1880, and they went numerically through about 1978, and then they changed things out. For more modern cases, you have a year at the beginning, a case type at the second after the dash. There's a numbering sequence for the case file, and then at the end, there's a digit, depending on filings and things. So if you go down to this listing, and this is from the Spokane County Clerk's website, which is really good, really helpful as far as explaining some of the dates. Let me scroll this down a little bit. So these are the different types of cases. So 1 is criminal, 2 is civil, 3 is domestic. So most of your divorces are going to fall there. 4 is guardianship and probate. 5 is adoption and paternity. 6 is civil commitment. 7 is juvenile dependency. 8 is juvenile offender. And then judgments and liens and things fall in the 9 category. So when you're looking for different types of case files, if they are like basically from about, I don't know, the late 70s, early 80s on, they're going to follow this kind of schema for the most part, depending on the county. Now, the older ones are just going to be by number, and the earliest case files, there was 3 case types mostly, and depending on the county, sometimes they mixed probate with their civil and divorce with their civil, but criminal was separate. And some of them did probate. So they basically had just probate, civil, and criminal at any given time. And so I think if you ever want to read some great case files or do some fun things with case file research or just have some interesting reading, I will plug our Frontier Justice case files, which they're indexed on here. And sometimes people end up getting into them because they're doing research on their property or research of the history of the area. And I did work with a researcher that was doing some research on their property and found out that these 2 neighbors had an ongoing battle with a cow. And that's all documented, including a little sketch of what the cow was doing in the field of the other guy. So they can be very amusing for sure. So we've got them arranged by county, and then you can do, I'll just pick Lewis County here. And then you can browse the series and it'll kind of show the bearings. Now these, we don't have the images for the case files up yet, but they are listed here, different types of cases. And then if you did want to look into them, you can see the different types of case files that are included. So there's some divorce, some recoveries, some collections, some personal damages, all that sort of thing. So, all right. Trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to mention about case files before we move on to the Q&A section. Your questions do not have to do anything with case files. I just decided to show this off. And then based on our discussion today, I think I might also move into criminal files in general. So jail and penitentiary files, because those can be very interesting and may hold a lot of information as well. So I'll do that next month. So I'm going to go back to the main screen and see if you have any questions for me today.
I have a question. My My grandfather was on the jury for a murder trial in Lewis County back in the 40s. Would it be possible to get that case file?
Yes, it may. So, and that's the one thing the piece I missed of the whole, thank you for bringing that up because I'll explain. So case, especially for county superior court case files are a permanent record to the county court. Occasionally, our branches in the state will also hold some of those files. Usually prior to 1920, we may have a pretty good set of them. And then after the 1920s, we may have sampled them. So you can always check with the regional branch to see if we have the case file. And if you know the case file number, or if you don't know, that's not a barrier to finding that out. But we could, if you send us an email to look up, if you give us everything you know about the case, and we can take a look and see if we have the case file. And if we don't have the case file, we will refer you to the Lewis County Court. And they can help you out because they do have the case files.
Okay, thank you.
I will say that the district court, and municipal courts do not necessarily keep their case files for long-term. They keep them for a certain amount of time, and most of those get destroyed. But sometimes the summary of the case is held for a long period of time.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
I have a question.
Sure.
And this is I'm just verifying this. I'm the archivist for Queen Anne Historical Society in Seattle, and we publish several articles every month. And so I just want to verify that the information that I would find in Washington State Digital Archives is public.
It is public.
Okay, so I don't need to get have our lawyer look at it or whatever.
There are some things on the digital archives that may have some restrictions to them, but they are kind of included in that. So sometimes we have an index of the items, but we don't actually have the physical item up, and it just is to help people find it. And then also many of the courts who host their papers on there, they want you to order the files, and the digital archives is kind of a clearinghouse for people to be able to see what's available and then order what they need.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Uh-huh.
I have a question for you, please.
Yes.
When I'm looking at the digital archives and I put in a particular person's name and age and all that, it's not showing that up at all. They're saying there's no record. But I have a death certificate for that person, and I'm confused why it's not showing up on the records.
It depends on the year, one, and two, it depends on how you search, because our digital archives is not, it was created in 2004 when searching was a little less global than it is now. So don't think of the digital archives as like a Google that's going to just see everything you put in and pull up anything that's applicable. So I usually recommend people just start at our main search page and just type in the bare minimum, like the name, first and last, no initials, no nothing. Sometimes you can go as simple as first initial, last name. And I wouldn't go into the specialized searching. Pardon me?
It's I'm looking in 1936.
For a death record?
To confirm a death record and then hopefully get some information to find the husband.
Okay.
Because he disappeared the same year.
So if you can't find, so the death records that we have, we recently released the death records in 2021, and we figured out that the ones that were imaged from 1907 to 1960, there were some gaps. So if you cannot find it on the digital archives, please email us, and if you know where they passed, that's the easiest way for us to try to hunt and peck to try to find them, because we do have some images that didn't make it up, and we're working out a strategy to figure out how to marry those up to the ones that are already there. So
okay, thank you.
Us.
That
okay.
might help, because the other person, her husband, literally disappeared off all the records I can find. I can find nothing from 1936 on.
Okay.
So I'm very puzzled. That's my brick wall.
I will tell you that there's many a people, I'll just say this in general, there's a lot of people who disappear and they wanted to disappear. And if you wanted to disappear in 1936, you could disappear.
Yeah, that's what I'm afraid of.
I always tell them, I think I've told this story on here a few times, but my aunt had what she called the rascal Roscoe. Roscoe
Okay.
Rascal. That she kind of knew where he ended up, but she could never really confirm it. And it took her 3 years to find him in Oklahoma, which was not a place that she thought he would ever have been. So,
Oh dear.
so
we're wondering if he went back to Canada, but I have no way of figuring out if he did. Wouldn't there be records of him crossing the border and all that?
You know, well, there's the legal way to cross the border, and there's the other way to cross the border. Oh. So keep in mind, people can cross borders, you know, and honestly, there's lots of vast landscape in our U.S. West where there's nobody on the border paying attention to who's coming over. So, yeah.
Okay, that's what I'm afraid of.
Yeah, that happens.
Right. So basically, I just keep looking.
Definitely, don't give up. Keep looking. Sometimes it's using census records can be helpful, but if they change their name or whatever, then that makes it kind of challenging. Sometimes you can link them in, like if someone's got an obituary where they are related to someone who died. Sometimes you'll list everybody in the obituary, you'll list all the living relatives and where they are sometimes, and that can be helpful. There's like these other little bits and pieces you can sometimes piece together, and sometimes that person doesn't want to be found. No one's going to find them unless you're in the right place, right time. Oh, that's my guy, like my aunt. So yeah.
Makes it harder.
Yes. Jameson, do you have any questions? Oh, sorry, Robin, are you done?
Good, thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, there are questions. Carol is looking for church records in Montesano and Natchez and Yakima. Did a newly organized church have to file any type of paperwork with the state or county?
Yes, they okay, I should say this is a fun one for me because I've been helping people try to track churches. So I do a lot of corporations research here for the state, and one of the funnest ones is to track churches. So churches are interesting because they can be nonprofit, they can be for-profit, they can have a partnership or a limited partnership. They can just be, and most of the time they're registered as nonprofit, but they can also change their names. So the question would be: did the church actually officially file with the state? And usually they would have to do that for tax purposes and things like that, especially if they were going to do any donate money or exchange money or sell things or anything like that. But a lot of churches formed locally and didn't actually register anything. So I would, if you want to send me the name of the church, I can help you kind of figure that out. We do actually have a directory of churches that is an older directory, and I think it goes up through about 1969. So some early churches that existed. Sometimes the church would file with the county auditor's office to file their papers, and sometimes they would just exist. But a lot of times, churches with a bigger hierarchy, so like the Catholic Church or a Baptist, some of the other Protestant religions like the Methodists or the Presbyterians, they have a bigger hierarchy. So sometimes they would incorporate, let's say, in their state of their headquarters, and then they would file something with the states where they had smaller churches, just so that they knew they were legal. It's a very fascinating research. So if you would like to send me the names of the church, I would be happy to give you some information. So it'll often give the names of the stakeholders and anybody in the governing body and their articles of incorporation. Sometimes it'll also list their bylaws.
I'm looking for, yes, articles of incorporation and stakeholders. These are churches that my grandfather came to Washington State to organize for the Congregational Church, the nationwide church. And the nationwide congregational church they didn't pay attention to their own history and they did not keep records. So I am looking for basically 1911 through 1930.
I would love to take a look for you. So Carol, shoot me an email.
Thank you.
Research, it's research at sos.wa.gov, and Jameson will put that in the chat as well.
Thank you.
DK wanted to add into the conversation about court records, said, district court person here, we only keep physical case files for 3 years after the final disposition of the case. The docket would be all that remains after that. That's for criminal and civil court files.
Yeah, I figured as much. I know that they're not required to keep the case file because of the types of cases that they keep. They do in the district court. It's the only thing that might be important. I mean, and I guess I have somebody from district court. So the name changes is the big one. If people have to prove their name change and they did it in district court, that's the people who are most concerned about trying to find the record of that. But usually in the docket, it would show the name change.
And did you already take Robin's question about how to find case files without knowing the case number?
I did not. If you don't know a case number, there's a couple different ways to do it. You can, depending on the age of the case file, you can do a search on Washington courts if it's something that happened, 80s onward. And sometimes you will find the case file number that way. The other thing you can do is if you know the county in which it was done, you can check some of the county courts websites have places where you can search as well, or you can contact one of our branches. Some of us do have the indexes to the case files or the appearance dockets that will show case file numbers.
DK added more to the court records part, saying we send the name change orders to the county auditor shortly after hearings, so the auditor is the custodian at that point.
Perfect. I like
coming from Snohomish County District Court. Perfect.
I have seen some of those in the auditor's filings, but not all of them. And I also have seen them, the older ones in the Superior Court files have some of the older Superior Court case files have name changes in them. I don't know what year they changed. Maybe DK knows. All right, any other questions for me? It doesn't have to be about court. It can be about anything pressing. I mean, I have some colleagues on here. You guys could throw me a curveball.
How do you go searching out divorces? My grandmother had 6 divorces and I'd like to find the records and I have no clue how to start.
Divorces are very interesting. So the state of Washington, so it can depend on the state. So the state of Washington did not start collecting divorce decrees centrally until 1968. So anything that happened prior to 1968, it's by county. So you'd have to know the county. And a lot of times people are like, I can't seem to find it in the county. So how do I find it? So it's shocking. Like a lot of times the way you find it is to see when they married again and where did they marry? Because sometimes the divorce happened in the same county where they remarried. Sometimes it doesn't. And then we have 2 counties here in Washington where it was easier to get a divorce, and that is Lincoln County and Wahkiakum County. And so sometimes those are the counties to check if you don't find it in the county where they lived or the next county they lived in. Most of the divorces from 68 forward, they're starting to put those up on the digital archives and they're working on getting those up. Unfortunately, there's no statewide index for pre-1968. So, but we do have some indexes for civil case files and for some domestic at the different branches. So we can help if you know if you know, we can check the indexes as long as you know a time period. It's harder for us to look if you're looking for like, 2 decades, because the way the indexes are, they are typically loosely alphabetical.
Okay. Okay. Because they started around 1950s.
Okay.
I'm not sure of dates without going back and looking at my documents, but I'd really like to find about more information. That helps. That gets me started.
Definitely.
Now, did they go to could people go to those counties that are where it was easier, even if they didn't live there, to get their divorce?
Yes.
The way people used to go to Vegas?
Yes, they could get a divorce from another county, and some people got divorced outside of the state of Washington.
Okay, like Vegas.
Or Oregon or Canada.
Oh, you could do that in Canada? I knew they did it in Mexico.
I don't know how legal it is. I never know.
Okay, more research. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Jessica wants to know, can you talk about any record series with uniform commercial code filings?
Ooh, that's a fun one. So uniform commercial code filings are typically something that's recorded with the county auditor's website. And there's actually a site you can go to that talks a little bit about what they are and who needs to file them. And I just recently pulled that up and sent that research off to someone. And if you want me to do that real quick, I can. Let me pull up the site first. So Department of Licensing has some information on the site. And it also gives a great listing of the types of forms that are there. Admittedly, I am not a well-versed archivist in UCCs. I do know how to find them, and I know how to find this page to talk a little bit about how to file. And it's basically based on a national model. So there's a website there you can go. But this is the listing for that. And I always recommend, if you want to know more about it, this is the best place to start. And they're very helpful. Like if you're on their webpage, DOL is very great about having asking you. They have a chat bot on their page. So if you wanted to ask them all kinds of questions, I'm sure they would be happy to help. I hope that helps a little bit. I recently had that question come into my inbox at the archives. So I'm thankful that that happened. Otherwise, I'd be like, I have no idea.
All right, are you ready for the next question?
Yes.
Wait. Oh, Jessica had a follow-up question, so I'll get back to the Carol's question in just a minute. Jessica says, I'm curious if Washington State Archives has records for UCC.
We do, but they would be the filings that end up in the county auditor's office. So they are indexed by county auditor. And if you go to our digital archives, you'll see there's actually a separate series for that. And then if you want to look for the older ones, you do have to know the name of the person who filed to find them in the general indexes. So they would be indexed in the grantor grantee indexes. I don't know if the state, I'd have to check that to see if there's anything at the state level besides the county level, to see if there's anything about the filings at the state level with Department of Licensing. Yeah. Jessica, I can always count on you to give me the stumpers. Thank you. It's all good.
Yeah, her questions are often like, tell me you're an archivist without saying you're an archivist. Carol says, is there any way to find a list of cases handled by a county prosecuting attorney 1915 to 1955?
So we do hold some counties' prosecuting attorney files. Some of them are protected by attorney-client privilege still, but usually by that time, by that age, they probably would not be. And they don't necessarily have a good listing. Like you would have to just review them. They don't necessarily say, there's never like usually a list necessarily that says, oh, here's the list of the different cases brought forth to the county prosecutor. And the thing of it is, cases can be brought to the county prosecutor's office, but maybe never actually tried, depending on their investigations and so forth. And oftentimes by the time they come to the archives, they've sifted out the ones. We're mostly interested in the ones that actually went forward to court, and less interested in the ones that didn't. Although as a historian, that seems really fascinating, but we don't have, unfortunately, we don't have unlimited space to store everything we think is fascinating. So we try to keep, like, since we're tracking the history of the office and how they handled business, that's kind of why we go with the ones that they did actually hear. So depending on the county, you can contact any one of our branches to find out like what prosecuting attorney case files we have. I know we have some from Thurston and Grace Harbor, and I know some of them are very specific because they were big cases. So.
No, but Carol specified Okanagan water rights.
Ooh, water rights are very interesting to research. So I just recently was asked, I'm working on some property research in Mason County, the Dewato Bay, and one of the documents that came up is the water rights. So I recently reached out to the Department of Ecology, who actually handles the water rights, and asked them how to best ask for what they have on file for water rights. And that's above and beyond what may be filed in the court or may be included with a county deed. Because oftentimes water rights can be different. Like someone can own land, but not the water rights. They can own both the land and the water rights. So it's interesting to look into that. Our Central Regional Branch Archivist, Bridget, is really, really well versed in the water rights, especially there in Central Washington. So, and that's one of her counties. So I would recommend contacting her about that to see what they can find. I think a lot of the Okanagan records still reside with the county auditor and the county clerk, but I know they've started to transfer some to our Central Regional Branch. So she might be able to help you out with how to find what you're looking for when it comes to water rights. And you may want to also try, so if you go to the Department of Ecology's website, they have a way of looking up water rights, the ones that are currently in play, and some of them go back quite a few years, and they actually have an interactive map where you can look those up. And then there's also a way you can actually request from the Department of Ecology the water rights for the area. If you want to look at that, like what's currently in play, and then kind of work backwards from there to do the research on the water rights. We've got about 10 more minutes, and I'm so excited to answer any additional questions you may have. Oh, there is a question that I missed. Robin, do you want to ask me that question publicly?
Yes,
Okay.
That's fine. I'm looking for if there's anything that Washington would have in records on the USO that was in the Seattle area during World War II.
So there could be records. Do you want to say what the USO is out loud so everybody else knows what you're talking about?
I can't remember what the letters stand.
Anyway.
I know where they took care of military guys, you know, they'd have a canteen and they'd have performers and they'd have a place for R&R. And my grandmother performed at one in the Seattle area, but I have no other information, and I'm very curious about it.
So it's interesting. So typically that would be a federal record, and there is a federal archives that's located in Seattle, Sandpoint, the National Archives there, and they may have some information about it. They also have a public hub where people can ask their questions about federal records that they do very interactively, and it also helps other researchers, and that's the History Hub. And maybe I can have Jameson share a link to that. If Jameson just Googles History Hub, NARA, it'll pop up. And But sometimes if they're working with either the county government or the local government or the state government to actually position that thing, sometimes there will be records about the conversation between the federal and the local government that talk about what they're planning on doing. That's assuming they decided to plan and they didn't just come in and say, we're doing this. So you may want to contact the Seattle Municipal Archives or the King County Archives or our branch archives in Bellevue to see if there was any sort of correspondence that may have happened with the federal government and whatever. The trick is trying to figure out what government entity would they have been talking to at the local level to make those decisions. Sometimes it happens with the county commissioners, at least for the county commissioners in many other counties, big decisions like that were made. I will say I've been doing a deep dive into Spokane Parks research, and the federal government actually talked a lot with the Spokane Parks about some of the sites in Spokane that they wanted to use for different purposes, or that Parks was trying to buy back from the government because they took custody of land during wartime, and they were trying to figure out how to, did they lease the building, or does the building have to be destroyed, or they had special housing that they were going to put in. So they did have correspondence with the local government to coordinate housing for military families, taking over an airport or an airfield during wartime. And so depending on which government entity they were talking to, there could be some correspondence to talk about that time period.
Well, that gives me a lot of more places to look. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm feeling a little overwhelmed on that one.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, the thing of it is, the thing you have to think about, which is always challenging, is what am I looking for, and who might have had a stake in this, or who may have been involved in this? Because sometimes thinking about that is what helps figure out where the record might be. And that's the thing, is you have to think about, well, what government entity might have been interested in this, or what sort of partnership might have been formed, and then that's how you would find it. So
yeah, okay. I don't know where else to look, so this is a good start.
All right.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the family didn't give any specifics, and my grandmother passed many years ago, so I don't know what place she was at when she was performing, when, dates, nothing.
So
none of that has it.
So Robin, I would recommend maybe doing some newspaper research, because that there may have been postings in the newspaper to see if there was an advertisement for an event. You might want to check in with the local military to see if they've got any old. There's military archives, and so they can actually sometimes say, if you might want to talk to the local Legion or Veterans Hall to see if they know anything about it, because they may have some information. So
I do know that when Hilo Hattie came into Washington to Seattle, my grandfather played with her as well. So maybe that would be a clue.
Yes, absolutely. But you see, you're already like an archivist. You're thinking like an archivist right there. Like, where can I, whose name can I search for, and it'll find it. Yes.
Every little bit else. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Carol suggested you could check the Joint Base Lewis McChord History Museum as well.
Good idea.
Definitely.
Thank you so much for this.
You're welcome.
We've got time for about one more question. Anybody got one more burning question before we go?
This isn't a burning question. It's just a comment. In researching my family that moved around a lot between United States and Canada, mostly up through New York State and Quebec, what's been really helpful is if they retained the same name through death, Find a Grave Canada is a good place to look, especially if they have better if they have an unusual name, but you can't always control that. But anyway, that's been a resource for those doing genealogy kind of research, or actually even newspaper research.
Thank you. That's a great idea.
And of course, if you have a question and you're shy about asking, you can just email our research team afterwards.
Yes, absolutely. So do you want to share our email address if you want to shoot us an email if you have a question, and we can either assist or we can help you find the right place to find the answer to your question. And I think that's the biggest piece, is just knowing that you have someplace you could start to ask the questions, and then if we're not the best place, we'll refer you to a place that is going to be a great place to try to find what you're looking for. All right. If there's nothing else, I'll just like draw that out a little bit. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you for those who are watching after the fact. And again, if you are watching after the fact, you can always join us again third Friday of the month from 10 to 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. And I usually will bring a topic and then open it to the floor to questions. And I love having conversations. The other thing is I'm not the expert on everything. I love learning from other people and learning more about things. And it's the more questions I get, the more I'm able to learn about a variety of things. And I love that. So thank you for giving me this opportunity.
All right, everyone. Have a great weekend.
Thank you, everyone.